Welcome to episode 10 of After School with Mr. Van Huss. Today I sit down with comic book writer Kyle Starks. Now, some of Kyle's most recent work includes Where Monsters Lie for Dark Horse Comics. And a side note, if you grew up as a fan of 80s and 90s horror movies and slasher films, you definitely need to check out Where Monsters Lie. He also recently finished up Peacemaker Tries Hard for DC Comics and Marvel Unleashed for Marvel Comics. He's got a lot more great stuff coming up very soon, and it's my pleasure to welcome to After School with Mr. Van Huss, Kyle Starks. Welcome to After School with Mr. Van Huss, Kyle Starks. We fought hard for this, and I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. It's always a thrill.
Absolutely. For those that may be watching that may not be familiar with your work, can you just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, my name's Kyle Starks. I'm a comic creator from Southern Indiana. I am probably best known now. I did the Rick and Morty comic for 5 years. I did Peacemaker Tries Hard, which is the second Peacemaker comic series ever. I did a series called I Hate This Place, which is recent, some horror stuff. Lots of Eisner nominations. Kind of a big deal, a minor big deal.
I was a huge fan of Where Monsters Lie that you did for
thank you.
Comics.
Yeah, I love it.
I really hope to see more of that in the future because I really enjoyed that. And before I forget, I've got to tell you, I have an 8-year-old son, and we read Marvel Unleashed together.
Oh, yeah.
And we both loved Marvel Unleashed.
Thank you so much. I think this year is my best body of work, which I can say because I have no regrets. I don't think I've done anything bad. I say that humbly. I say it objectively. I don't think I've done anything bad, and I think this last year has maybe my best group of work. So I'm super proud of that.
Well, it's very good. And for anybody who hasn't checked that stuff out, I highly recommend it all. Peacemaker Tries Hard was so enjoyable.
Thank you.
I like seeing Peacemaker get this new popularity, mainly through the
show
series and all that. And he's a fun character.
Yeah, James Gunn and John Cena, made a character no one cared about into a really great character that's super fun to play with, and I think is really additive to the superhero universe. I think he's a very modern. I say this a lot. I think he's a very modern character because I think he reflects a lot of young people's place in the world, and I think it's really interesting.
Very cool. And I think I just saw the other day you're working on a Wild Dog story for DC, aren't you?
I'm doing a 3-issue Wild Dog thing in Batman Brave and the Bold. I'm doing so much stuff, man. All the people reaching out to me. It's very exciting.
Very cool.
Especially as we get into my origin or whatever. Like I'm 46. Like I'm not young, I'm only getting older, and to be reached out now, it's crazy. You just never know when things are going to happen, I guess.
That's very cool. You may not run across that many Wild Dog fans, but I have his original 4-issue miniseries that I bought off the stands when I was a kid. And I've always kind of had a fondness for that character. I loved when he showed up on Arrow, and I look forward to reading your take on him.
If you like Wild Dog, I love Wild Dog. He's exactly the type of character I love what you call it, sort of a D-level character, a D-list character. But the thing I love about Wild Dog is that he was set in the Midwest, and I'm in the Midwest. You're in the Midwest too. He wasn't set in Gotham or Metropolis or New York or LA, and how he's sort of a really strange attempt to recreate Punisher for DC that fails miserably. But all the things about that series, I do a lot of Easter eggs. The thing, and I don't know if this is what you want to talk about here, but the thing with that original series is that it was supposed to be like a mystery, but no one cared about the mystery. It's who is Wild Dog. So I do this thing where a major supervillain has came to Quad Cities, Iowa, and it's like, who is the supervillain? So I kind of play into a lot of those things. There's a lot of Easter eggs about the creators of that comic because it's Max Allan Collins and Terry Beatty. And Max Allan Collins wrote Dick Tracy for years also. He still writes Dick Tracy. So it's a weird, so I try to do shout outs for those guys. It's fun. I think that character, the original version of that character is not very interesting. He has no personality. So I kind of make him sort of a soft Peacemaker-esque. He's sort of a dummy. He's not that smart, and he's trying really hard. And those are kind of my favorite types of guys. And I think for any of those D-list characters, and I sort of love them all, I think that's probably something that's universal. It's they don't have what Green Lantern has or Superman has. So they have to try harder, and they're sort of trying harder despite themselves, which I think is a great story about, sort of underdog stuff. You know what I mean? They're always underdogs. So I like to write them that way.
Well, that's super cool. I look forward to reading that one.
3 issues. It's so good. I think it comes out maybe next week. It's soon. It's real soon. It's in Batman Brave and the Bold. Batman Brave and the Bold #7.
Awesome.
For anyone who cares.
Very, very cool. So what influenced you to do what you do? What made you want to get into writing comics?
Man, so I'll do my origin story real quick because I think it's a good one. Everyone who got into comics is not, there's no one way to do it. Certainly if I was 22 today and not 46, I was like, I want to get comics. There's routes that I would try that are completely different than what I did. My origin story is such. I've always loved comics. As a little kid, I was reading comics. My uncle's name is Tony Starks. I think he turned me on to comics. I've always loved them. I worked at a comic shop that sold not just comics. It was video rentals. It was used books, used music. So I had a cornucopia of media to consume for nothing because I worked there. And I've always loved comics. But when I was working in a shop, it was the mid-90s, and comics were bad. They weren't fun. They weren't enjoyable, in my opinion. They're very dark and not very joyful. And I went to college to be a fine artist. I was going to be a painter. I knew that wasn't going to work out very quickly because that is an incredibly difficult industry to make a living in. So I switched to graphic design, and I sort of never thought about it. And being someone who'd always been drawing, of course, I tried to draw comics my whole life and never sort of finished them. And I'd say from college to a decade plus, I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything creative. I tried to learn guitar. I got married and started having kids, and I made a list. Like once you have a first kid, your personal time changes, and you realize you have so little of it. And I actually made a list of all the things I wanted to complete before we had our second kid, because my wife was pregnant with our second kid. And number one on the list was finish a comic. It wasn't just finish a comic because I'd never done that. I'd started them. I'd probably drawn like 12 pages of a comic, and I never finished them. And so I started doing a project. I just did it online because I knew if I put a date, I would be responsible to that. That's my like hack. That's the Kyle hack. If I say I'm going to do something, I do it. I just can't help myself, and if I don't, it crushes me. So obviously, that missing that one agreement to do this thing was heartbreaking for me. But neither here nor there. And so I did it. I didn't advertise it. I didn't promote it. But I found I really loved the process of telling stories this way. I got sort of discovered by a very popular, at the time that no longer exists, comics news site. I was recommended I should start doing conventions, and I loved it. It was a hobby that made money, and I just really enjoyed the process in doing it. The second book I did was called Sex Castle, which I ended up sort of being discovered by Matt Fraction at one of these shows that I only went to because people said I should go to them. And that became an Image deal. I sold that. I optioned that to Hollywood before it came out. It was nominated for an Eisner. So my first book was sort of like as huge a hit as a book can be that made no money. And that would have been 8 years ago. So I was 38. I was 38 basically when I started making comics. At 40, I was able to go full time, but only because I had to. I was working at a really great union printing job, and the plant shut down. So my wife took a job cleaning bathrooms at a hospital for a year to see if I could make comics for a living. And that was the year I got Rick and Morty. Just very lucky. Things just worked out. So, yeah, that's my origin story, man. I sort of fell into it. In fact, even with Matt Fraction, I met him at the show as a lark because there's a place to eat at this show in Charlotte called Mertz. And I wanted to go so badly, but you can't go by yourself. So I sort of like grabbed onto a group. And it ended up being they were doing a podcast interview with Matt Fraction and Chip Zdarsky, who I both considered friends now. Chip Zdarsky, I think, is a dear friend. And we ended up talking newspaper stuff. And I was working at newspapers before. And he's like, oh, what's this book? And I was like, it's whatever. Don't worry about it. And I ended up bringing it to him. And he ended up bringing it on a plane. Like, that's it. His plane didn't take off in time. And he read my book. And he liked it, and then asked me like to talk to Image, and I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. Like, I don't know what's going on, whatever you think I should do. And since then, like I said, it's up and onward. Like I'm semi-notable now at 46.
That's very, very cool. So before you got into the field of work, who are some of your heroes? Like, who are some of the writers and artists that you read as a kid or read growing up that attracted you to comics?
It's funny. So I was out of comics for so long, and I remember coming back. I mean, over a decade, I hadn't read comics. I had other stuff going on. I was being kind of an adult, but even that's not true. We were partying a lot. We were drinking a lot. Neither here nor there. But I'd say, as a young person, like I bought anything John Byrne did, and I came back there like, don't talk about him. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I look back where I'm at now. I look back and like Evan Dorkin, I think is a huge influence on me. I love Evan Dorkin, but I'll tell you, it's tough to remember because I read everything as a kid. We worked at a comic shop, but you read everything that came out, right? And like you like everybody. When you're in comics, you kind of like everybody. But I think the thing that inspired me to really make comics, and this is sort of a backhanded compliment, but I started reading comics again later. People were recommending things to me, and I read this the Swedish cartoonist named Jason, and I love Jason. I adore him. They're sort of these anthropomorphic animals doing like Alfred Hitchcock mashups. I think the first one I was given was The Last Musketeer, or I Killed Adolf Hitler. I love East Bank Gang. Anyway, they're very simply done, but they're composed. I mean, they're brilliant. They're really brilliant, but they're very simply done. And I was reading these books, like they're short. They're 80 pages, maybe less, maybe 60 pages. And I thought I could do this. Like I can't. I think prior to that, my entire life, and this was late again, like let's say 35, maybe 34. I thought, well, I can't draw like Todd McFarlane. I can't draw like Rob Liefeld. I can't draw like Jim Lee. I can't make comics. But seeing this, I thought, no, I can do this. Like I can draw this well, and I can see the storytelling is more important than sort of like how impressive the aesthetic is, or how, if the story is good, then the comic will be good as long as it's clearly told. And I'm an okay artist. No one, everyone hires me for my writing. They don't hire me for my art. But man, I like so many. There's so many things. All the Vertigo stuff, Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol, and I don't think you can see that stuff in my work. But there's something about the freedom of it. I remember getting Bone in single issues. There's so many. Kurt Busiek. I love. I mean, like there's so many. I say now that probably like once I started making comics, my biggest influences are Jason, Jack Kirby, because he's the king of panel composition. You can't go wrong looking at how Jack Kirby did something and going, all right, that solves my problem. And Naoki Urasawa, who I think is as important to comics as Jack Kirby is, which is maybe not right, but I think he's a modern master. Guy Davis's storytelling is unbelievable. I like everybody, man. And the thing that I think about a lot for me in terms of like how might you become this gestalt? Like how does your life bring you to this point? It's like when I worked at that comic shop, I watched every movie. Like we watched everything. If I saw a book come in that I thought was interesting, I read it. Music. I've ingested so much story, and I kind of did it critically on accident. But like that's how you do it. One of my friends has a doctorate in poetry, which is useless. But one of the things he said, like, because you go to your doctorate, you have like a mentor, right? Like you have the person who sort of leads you through to your doctorate. And he asked him once, like, how can I be a better poet? And this mentor said, read all the poetry you can. Like read good poetry, read bad poetry, read all the poetry you can. And that's what I think about where I am and how I'm able to do this, is that I've loved story my entire life, no matter what form it's in. And I've consumed them, and I go, I like this and I like that. And you sort of go, well, that's how you tell your story. It's like, oh, what if I did this thing and that thing, or I like this one trick, and I wish I could figure out how to do my version of it. So I always think that's the best advice is how to do something is to consume and do it as much as possible.
Very good advice. So what was high school like for you, and what further education did you do?
Man, high school was great. I feel like my kids are in high school now and they're not having a great time. I literally I just floated through high school. I took a ton of art classes, which you couldn't even do then. I don't know how I would take 2 art classes a semester in my senior year, but I did. High school was great. I hate to say that. I also kind of didn't care, and that's what made it great. It's sort of like a reverse, like the less you care, the better it is somehow. High school is complicated. After that, I went to college. I went to a local university. I went there. I was going to go to an art school. It was really expensive, and they offered me, they approved me into it, but they didn't offer any scholarships. So it's like, I can't afford this. So my local university every artist was a working artist. So And now looking back, like that's priceless, because if you go to art school and they're just teaching, which first of all, they don't teach you anything. Honestly, they don't teach you how to mix. They don't teach you how to hold a brush. Like no one ever said, "Hey, you're doing that wrong." No one ever said that. They just looked at your end product. It was a strange experience. So I went to college for several years. I didn't finish. I had to get work, and it took me a long time because I was working jobs to pay for my college. I think I'm a year away from graduating college, but I'd have to take all the core classes I'm never going to take, especially at 46. I'm not going to take gym at 46, you know? So I never finished. I went directly into the workforce. I got a job working in a newspaper. I actually was working at a bank call center for like 5 years. I didn't think art was in my future. I always enjoyed it to some. I like drawing my entire life, doodling. Like I said, I always loved it, but I just felt there was nothing. It wasn't ever going to be anything. And so when the time came, like I said, when I started doing it, just to mark it off a list, and all those years of experience. But I think even though we don't need years of experience, you just look at what you like and consume as much as possible, and then try to smash it into a thing that you like. My thing was always, I'm going to make the thing that I wish existed in the world. So if I wish there was a book about a dog that loved a cat and they lived on the moon, and that's what I made, right? Like, which I didn't do. They're much more adult than that. But and that was sort of some of the secrets of that. But yeah, man, I went to college. I was a fine art major with a creative writing minor. Useless, completely useless. And I'm not for sure there's 100% things that I learned from art school that translated into my profession. And I'll tell you what they are. You don't need to go to art school now. One, you learn what real criticism is, because for art school, there's no tests. At the end of whatever period, you put your piece up and everyone in the room says what they don't like about it. You learn what's real criticism and what's not criticism. And you learn how to respond to that. Like a mature person, you go, okay, I need to get better. I think being objective about creative things is very hard. It's the secret to being good. It's not being hateful. You go, this character, my intention with this character fell flat this time. The next time I'll make sure I don't make that mistake. This book could have been better if this happened or this happened. It's still good. I tried my best. I made the thing I wanted. I'll be better the next one. So that's one thing you learn. Two, you learn networking. Networking is really important in creative fields, in almost any field, but being able to act professional, being able to be charming enough that people want to spend time with you, being able to offer value in some way. Networking is really important. And that's maybe it, honestly. Oh, and things have to finish. Creative things have to finish. There's a deadline. You can't work on that painting forever. You can't work on that story forever. At some point, it has to stop. And mentally adjusting yourself to being happy with what that end product is and how to get to that end product, I think are really important in creative fields. I think that probably applies to everything. But no one ever told me anything about mixing colors, or there was no lessons. There was only like, what are we doing now? We're doing still lifes, and get after it. And you just have to figure everything out. There's like color theory classes, but there you can read color theory, right? So there are things that I learned, and it's funny because you can see that in people who didn't go to art school professionally, because they'll spend a day drawing a hand. It's like, well, you can't spend a day drawing a hand. You have to simply make it look as close to a hand and keep moving. And you understand, like, that's the way it is. So you can see when people didn't go to art school, but those are all traits that you could learn and, sort of self-teach.
That is all such good advice. Before I became a teacher, I didn't start teaching until I was 30. Straight out of college, I worked for the Country Music Association, and I wanted to be in the music business. So I helped on award shows and music festivals and that kind of thing. And that's where I started. And then I was a little bit older and decided I don't want to just jump from like public relations job to public relations job. And that's what got me back into teaching. And what you said right there about networking, about accepting criticism and learn how to do that. I want my students or whoever else watches this to understand that's important stuff no matter what field you go into.
Yeah, I think even just in life, I think, and I know there's a saying, if everyone says like you're a butthead, if everyone says it, like you're a butthead, right? And that's sort of a good way to gauge criticism. is if you're in a room of 7 people and 5 of them go, that yellow is bad. The yellow is probably bad. It's possible you're not in the right room. It's very possible this is not the room that yellow was for. And that's a choice. That's an objective choice that you're making. But I think that was sort of the biggest thing, is that if you learn, I mean, if you, like the poetry thing, right, that I said earlier, if you read so much poetry, you start to go, well, this is good and this is bad. You can see the bad, and then you go, well, I don't want that in my work. I don't want this. I'm going to avoid this bad part. In that similar vein, when I was sort of first, I was probably a few years in. I was probably doing it professionally at that point, and I remember looking at some local comic clubs, like anthology comic they made, and it was very naive. It was very raw and very, untrained people making comics. But that wasn't what I looked at, because like, oh, it looks bad. But there was one where there's like no backgrounds at all, and I was like, oh, that looks terrible, right? Like I want to make sure I have backgrounds. But in the same regard, like I've read enough Jack Kirby to know you don't have to put a background in every panel. You just have to, you can skip a panel page probably. So there's like that balance. It's like that's what you learn by consuming things in whatever your media is. And when people ask me, my kids, it's like, if you want to be good at something, you could almost definitely do it. Will you be great? I don't know. But I think anyone can be good at anything just through repetition, just through practice and consuming, And I believe that. I believe that with my entire heart. Obviously, I guess like if you had no arms, you'll never be a Major League Baseball pitcher. There are some parts, obviously, if you're tone deaf, it might be really hard to be a musician. There's certain things that you go, okay, well, not that. There's certain handicaps. I'll never be a singer. And my eyesight's terrible, so I could never. My daughter did archery for a while, and I loved archery, but I don't see well. I just can't see well enough to do it, right? And you could learn. I could try to figure it out, but it's like if you move the target anyway, I can't do it anymore. So that's what I think is like repetition and consumption is so important. Because that's how you learn how. If you want to do comics or no matter what it is, but if you want to tell a story, learn find the story you want to tell, right? And learn the best way to do it the way that you want it to be. And you can only do that by consuming other stories, because you never know when you're trying to do a serious war. Like I want to do a war comic. Not in 2023. Don't do that. There's enough problems. But you want to do a war comic, and then you watch a comedy, and there's like one character who does something like, you know what? Like I want to see that character in this other setting. You never know when you find the one thing that makes your idea even better, or how to do a little, I like how they twisted this. It's like, I bet I could apply that to a mystery, or and that applies for anything. I think music, you know what I mean? Like anything, even like welding, anything. I like how they did that, and I'm going to try to figure out how to do that. Or I'm going to weld all the time, and I found a new way to do things. Doing things and consuming things is the way we improve, because we're mental creatures.
So when you were growing up, did you have a favorite teacher or a mentor or anybody like that kind of stood out to you that helped you along the way?
Man, I think I had a couple, and I was so I think when I was younger, and I'm Gen X, because I drew all the time and I was okay, there was certainly a lot of, you're really good at this. And I think when I was a kid, every class had one kid who was good at, like, even if there was 3 kids who were really fast, only one got to be the fast kid, right? I don't know what the other kids did. They were probably upset. But I was like the art kid. So my art teacher in high school was great. And her husband actually worked at the college I went to. And they were very supportive. But I think I had an English teacher for like 1 year who I think maybe was also the theater director. It's tough to remember because that was a long time ago. His name was Mr. Russell. And I remember him because he was encouraging to me in a way that wasn't my art. It was my storytelling. And I never thought I was going to be a writer. That was never my interest. I didn't get into writing at all until I was in college, honestly. I always thought about things visually, but like I said, I always loved story. And now I look back and I go, man, I always loved story. Like I never bought a comic because of the art. I mean, I probably did, but I never was like, that's not true. There's some guys I did, but for the most part, my memory was never, look how great this image is. It was always, look how great the story is. So I look back now and I go, man, but I think about that one teacher a lot. I think about my art teacher. Her name was Miss Dowery. Miss Dowery, she was great. And they were both encouraging in different ways, and surely left a mark, for sure. I had really good teachers, though. I'd say I only had a couple of duds. So I don't remember a lot of me going, it's pretty good.
That's very good. So one last question for you.
Oh
You've
yeah.
got the ear of high school students. What is one life lesson that you would pass on to young people today, especially when it comes to in terms of chasing their dreams?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd really just be rehashing what I said. I really think people can do anything. I mean, I believe it. I really think people can be good at anything. And but the secret to that is you have to be willing to put the work in. And for creative stuff, like I said, it's the work is consuming things and then doing them. And that's not particularly hard, but it is time consuming. If you want to, a movie's 2 hours. So it's a lot of consuming and doing. But practice makes perfect is a real thing. Self-awareness is a real thing. Look at what you're doing and think about what you're doing and think about the repercussions of what you're doing. I think being objective in your pursuits is important. That doesn't mean be self-critical. That doesn't mean be destructive. It means everything you do is a lesson. Even a failure is a lesson. I'm trying to think of what I want my personal children to know. Be really nice to your dad. He's getting older and it's hard. Yeah, I really think, practice makes perfect is something that we hear over and over and over, but I really think it's true. Again, an aside, but in my own life, when I wasn't making comics anymore, a guy traded me a guitar for 40 cups of coffee over a summer. This would have been when I was like 21. And I remember the people going to this day, he'll never learn how to do it. And I didn't learn to do it because they said that. I did it because I had nothing else to do. But the secret to doing it was to just do it all the time. I was self-taught. I don't know if I'd recommend. Sometimes it's good to take lessons from other people, but it's like I really believe you can do anything if you put your mind to it and you do the work. And the work isn't hard, especially if you love the thing. And I think the secret to loving a thing creatively is to go, I want this thing to exist in the world to some regard. And that as an end goal, you'll like it. You'll like what you made because you made the thing you wanted to exist, and you go, let's do it again. So that's my lesson. Probably there's probably more. Those are the ones I can think of right now in the moment. Never give up. That's another thing. Never give up. Also, I will say for comics, I can do this forever. I will say for comics, for the people I know who were talented, maybe not great, because you don't have to be the best at something to do something. I aspire to be better every time. I know I'm not ever going to be the best writer in comics, right? I know I won't ever be. But something I find for a lot of people in comics who are trying to make it, who are pretty good, who are solid hands, and it doesn't work out, it's because they never learned any of the social aspects. They were fine writers, but they were awkward. They couldn't sit in a meeting. They couldn't be professional. And I do think that's important. And I think that's maybe something that's often lost when you're like, let's talk about how to compose a story. It's like, yeah, but also you have to go to dinner with a potential boss at some point in time. And you want them to want to work with you. So I would say that also is pretty important. I don't know, man, never give up. That's what I say. Never give up and you'll get there. It'll be great. Never give up. Don't hate yourself. Just do the best you can. Just always be better. Do the best you can and always be better.
That is excellent.
I hope
Kyle,
it is. I don't know.
thank you so much for sitting down and talking to me today. I greatly appreciate it. For anybody watching, check out Kyle Stark's work. Check out Where Monsters Lie, Marvel Unleashed, Peacemaker Tries Hard, Sex Castle, the future issues of Batman, the Brave and the Bold, starting in issue 7. Anything else you can talk about that's coming up soon?
I actually have a YA book coming out next June. It's my first book besides Marvel Unleashed that I'd say was appropriate for someone under I'd say all my stuff is PG-13 to R. My daughter always said, when are you going to make something that our kids can read? And I said, I guess when they turn 18, they can read all of it. So it's called Karate Prom. I'm really proud of it. It's very much one of my books. We just took out the curse words. You know what I mean? It's a lot of fun. It's the first, I drew it over the pandemic when everything was awful, and it probably saved my life. I'm very pleased with it. First, second, June of next year is called Karate Prom. I'm trying to think of what I can talk about. I can't talk about anything. I'm literally, I think I'm doing 5 to 7 books right now, and none of them have been announced yet. So I have a Batgirl thing in this Beast World. There's like a 5-page Batgirl thing, which is crazy. I just did Harley Quinn, and Harley Quinn White, Black, and Redder. That was great. It's a crazy time, man. I'm telling you, like I grew up loving this. I grew up loving this medium, and now I never thought. You know what I mean? I never thought, this was never my aim or my goal. I just found something that I love doing, and I worked out. I just kept finding ways to do more of it and to be profitable. And so it's crazy that I think once I was a little kid reading Justice League, you know what I mean? That I had to steal off the top of the fridge because my mom wouldn't give it until my chores were done. And now it's like, now I'm doing it. It's crazy. It's so crazy.
Well, congratulations, and I look forward to all your future work. I've enjoyed so much of it that you've done so
Thanks,
far.
man.
And thank you very much for staying after school with Mr. Van Huss and talking to me for a little bit.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, take it easy, Kyle. I'll talk to you soon.